remember that delta is a way to measure rate of change of time. So delta t is rate of change of time. So t1 minus t2 equals delta t, essentially. But the reason why I feel like delta is such a powerful symbol and something that I always look for is that unless you're measuring the right thing and you're measuring what the current limit is, you can't get real change. And I was deep into the research side of things in psychology, and I realized actually there's a lot of things that we know. So let's say this is what we know, and this is what we're actually doing. So let's say this is how much we know empirically what works for us as human beings, right? And let's say how much we do is a fraction of that. So, for example, for sake of argument, we can take gratitude. We can take the research that we know through positive psychology. We know that people, when they practice gratitude journaling, when they practice, taking long walks, for example, they're going to influence their neurology in a positive way. You know that for a fact. Now, applying that to actually doing the thing is, for humans, incredibly hard, right? So between what we know and what we do, there's a gap there that exists. And that gap is my life's work, essentially. Like bridging that gap as much as possible is my life's work. And I feel like there's a ton of things, health is full of, like the health industry is full of these things where we have new workouts and ideas and ideologies and diets and all this other stuff. But foundationally, it comes down to a few simple, stupid things. When done well, produce results. When done poorly, produce no results, right? So Violet's work is essentially around designing systems, behavioral systems that make it beautiful and simple to change. Not easy, simple, right? Change is never easy. Change is a fucked up, complex thing, right? It's now the closest we can come to elegance is simplicity. Because if the psychological side of change is already pretty tough, why complicate the technical side of it? Keep the technical side real simple, right? So you can look up the tools we've created. The 5minutejournal.com is where you can visit if you want to check out the 5-minute journal. Productivityplanner.com is something you can check out if you're looking to move through your work day in an effective way. Where you focus on the one thing that really matters, and that's it. If that's difficult for you, that product will essentially fix that issue. It's not a to-do list. It's not a way to help you manage your tasks. It's a way to help you get done the one thing that you need to get done. That's it. So about 16 months ago or so, I met someone who's one of my closest friends right now. And we met through mutual friends, and we realized both of us were as interested in creating and building habits as people who were the most fanatical sports fans, for example. Like the State's full of these people, right? Like I'm a Cubs fan, I'm a this fan. I don't even know sports, but like people are extreme with that shit. And we're extreme about building habits. We're extreme about, potentially introducing new things that are going to change each other's lives. So we started doing something which is interesting. So we have a shared Google Sheet, and we have an ongoing bet, essentially. So let's say we assign about $100 to a day, right? And I have 10 habits. So you have 100 divided by 10, which means each habit is worth about $10. So each day that I don't follow through on a habit, I lose $10. Let's say he's got the same setup. Each day that he doesn't do a habit, he loses $10. And so every day, one of the habits is actually logging in to the shared group, right? So you have to log in. If you don't log in, you'll lose a point. And consequently, in this example, $10. And so what happens is you build a very powerful feedback loop. In the beginning, we started with 4 habits, right? So I believe it was meditation, journaling, spraying magnesium at night, and flossing, right? That was like, I didn't floss before that. I was just not aware of that habit as a potential cool thing in my life. And I was like, fine, let's start doing this. And I'm still flossing, which is awesome. It was a huge win for me, believe it or not. So started from there, and then got to a point where I'm at 15 habits now, right? And that includes like heart rate variability, training in the morning, and really started to stack habits together. So there's a morning routine stack and an evening routine stack, and there's a work routine stack. And what's really cool about that is it helps, it essentially helps build habits as if it's a trainable process. And there's oh my God, there's this tiny bits of information that you can string in where you keep something. For example, spraying magnesium before you go to sleep. I lost a point a couple of days ago because of this, just because it was just not by the pillow. You don't keep it by the pillow, it doesn't get done, right? The where you keep something matters. And very similar to that, the accountability, where let's say you couldn't follow through on a habit, what happened? Really knowing the outer edge of your current ability is extremely important in being able to follow through on that. So for example, in probably like December and November, definitely November last year, I overextended. What I mean by that is I added a couple of new habits to my month. So at the end of every month, we tally up the money and either give each other money, depending on the situation, right? And then we also have to figure out our habits for the next month. So when we do, sometimes have a stretch week where we try to add on a couple of habits and see what's going to stick. I did not use a stretch week. I just went in I'm going to add a couple of new habits to the mix, and I got destroyed. Destroyed because I overextended. And this happens in a lot of humans. It's a very common misconception. I'm still learning to weed away from it, especially in other areas of my life. Lack of overextension can be not overextending. Overconfidence bias can be a huge thing in not understanding what habits to build and how to move through on it. And so something that I really recommend everybody here is don't start with a stack of habits. Start with one habit and one friend who is awesome. and create some kind of accountability, right? With real money. It doesn't matter how much, but it has to be enough for it to sting. And keep that feedback loop running. You need somebody who's willing to stand by you and watch you to make sure you're following through. And the same thing with, you should be the kind of person who's just looking out for them and ensuring that they're going to succeed. This is a really wonderful thing that you can do that eventually builds both of your behaviors. And now you start to know each other's patterns really well, so you can start to help each other build more habits beyond that. And so that's really the foundation of how essentially we can think of new things to build for our audience. Is we keep doing this, and because we start doing more things that we know is going to make our lives better, we know that, let's say we take this down maybe a notch or 10, and now we can have something that we can share with other people as a system that actually helps them create one habit that can be like a game changer, essentially. For example, airplane mode. in the first 2 hours of waking up. It's been amazing, right? It's awesome. You know, there's no social dinging. There's no nonsense. You can go through your morning routine in a really crisp, beautiful way. You can make breakfast. You can just feel like you have that day. I abuse airplane mode all the time. And I'm a huge fan of the book Deep Work by Cal Newport, because it allows you to have long, uninterrupted stretches of time where you can actually do work and you can actually accomplish incredible things. There's actually a very strong argument in the book where he talks about the value that we have, especially currently in the marketplace, is almost entirely because of our cognitive output, because of our soft skills that we have. Anything that is technical or that can be done by a flowchart is going to be taken over if it hasn't already been taken over by machines, which is great. So what the skill sets that we require is being able to leverage intelligent machines. Because if we can leverage intelligent machines, then that we become a force multiplier in the economy, essentially. And if you're in that business, you'll need to harness long, uninterrupted amounts of time to actually produce work. And ironically, right, we have a bunch of apps, be it the social apps or anything that dings, having an incredible budget to help you make them money and not focus on the thing that's most important to you. And so when you're in that situation, the only thing you can potentially do is to turn all of it off and just focus on the thing that matters. When I do email, a lot of the time, I'm not actually great with email. And actually it helps me get the work that I need to get done. When I'm replying to emails in batches, are you guys familiar with this concept called Gmail offline? So what's cool about Gmail offline is you can just download all your stuff to Gmail offline. And it's typically used for airplanes when people aren't on Wi-Fi. And people just respond to a bunch of emails, connect to the internet, click send, and it all sends them all at the same time. So I use Gmail offline by turning off the Wi-Fi. I just turn it off. And I do email in, let's say, an hour or two, and I send it off. And I don't do email for quite a while. and that just batches my time in a way that helps me focus on the things that really matter to me. Things like that are going to help you become happier. The research on happiness is pretty conclusive. You're going to be happier if you learn to direct your attention to things you care about. Let me repeat that. You're going to become happier when you learn to direct your attention to things that you care about and that make you feel good. That's why the 5-minute journal works, is because it helps you train your mind to look at the positive consistently. Every day, multiple times a day. Attentional direction is the foundation of happiness. And if your attention is at the mercy of something else, your happiness is at the mercy of something else. And so Mark had a question of what other habits are currently on my Google Sheet ball. I can just read it off. Give me a second. Because I usually have this in the background because I'm updating it quite a bit. So, okay. Here we go. So HRV in the AM, heart rate variability. I do neti pot once a week, which is this kind of yogic exercise that I was told that helps you have better breathing. I wrote down open threads and task flow in a notebook. This is my notebook for that. Spray magnesium before bed. Cool down review plus planning after work session. Airplane mode. I think we already talked about this. 15 pull-ups. I had a bet with another friend that I inserted into this one to do an Instagram post every day. So that was that. Supplements. make breakfast. That's actually a keystone habit for me. Cold shower, journal, not the 5-minute journal. It's just like a longer form journaling that I do. Meditation, update habit log before noon. And recently started to practice Spanish in the morning, Duolingo style. So, and something else that's on my list is training high intensity interval training a couple of times, but I haven't added it because not too confident about that. I don't think I can fit that in right now with all the stuff that's going on. So that's a snapshot essentially of the things I'm doing.
I jump in with a quick question about habits for things that may be good for you, but you don't want to do. Like you mentioned cold showers, and right now I'm doing a cold shower challenge. And if it wasn't for accountability right now, I would have quit already.
Sure.
And what are your methods? Are there things beyond or outside of the accountability that get you to do things?
There's a few things, right? 1, there's accountability. 2, there's money that you're losing. But 3, over time, you have to understand that gets easier, right? Cold shower my first month was horrible, right? It's crazy. Like you're screaming like a little girl. It's not fun, right? And I started in January in the Northeast. So needless to say, it wasn't pleasant outside. It was 20s. It was, it was bad essentially. But over time, what happens is today I took a cold shower and didn't blink twice. Right? It was cold. It was still freezing, but it's your body just naturalizes to it. There's a process called normalization, which happens, which you just learn to look at the cold, the sensation. Like, so it's, in Toronto, I don't know if in Fahrenheit, but I would assume it's about 40-ish right now. And I'm in a t-shirt, right? I didn't bring a jacket. This is all I'm wearing today. So what happens is your body just adapts. And once it adapts, you start doing a lot cooler stuff. Like it's very stimulating. And so like hot shower right now would feel like cheating. I don't even actually like it. It doesn't stimulate me as much. It doesn't actually get me ready for the day. So your perception around cold is going to change over time. And so what you want what you want to do right now is definitely do the cold, because you want to bet on the normalization happening, because that's a normal human process, right? What your brain's trying to trick you in saying is, hey, it's going to be this bad the entire way through, right? So you got to say, listen, brain, I know you're lying, right? I know I'm going to follow through on this. And 2 months later, if you're still like, I guarantee you won't be lying, essentially. 2 months later, you'll find it's not as bad anymore. And the way you'll know about it is you won't be even thinking about it, right? It's the same thing with money, the same thing with sex. The only time you're not thinking about it, the only time you're thinking about it is when you're not getting any, right? So same thing, like when it doesn't affect you, it's just not going to bother you anymore. You'll be fine. You can move on to the next thing. Does that answer my question? Answer your question?
Yes.
Sweet.
Yeah.
All right. How long is your morning routine? How much time do you chunk out of your day in the morning to do your morning habits? A couple of hours is around the time that I spend. I like my morning routine to be like relaxed as hell. I don't like people to bother me. Like I have it entirely to myself. I'm an introvert. I love long stretches of thinking time. That's just my preference. You don't have to do that. You don't. That's just something I love. It's one of my favorite parts of the day. So as you mentioned, you already kind of know my morning stack, essentially. And it's, I have fun with it. I play music, I dance. I usually play music before I walk into the cold shower. And just have fun with it. That's fun. You can design. That's cool. You can design your work day, like your flow during the day. It's just a really cool thing. And in a lot of the places, most people allow for virtual work as well. That's the same thing in our company. Like you don't need to be in where I am to actually work for me. You can be anywhere you want, as long as you're having a fun time, as long as you care about the things we care about, as long as aligned, let's work together. This is awesome, right? And so a lot of the time I'll tell my people, take a nap. It's going to improve your cognitive performance. Like drink bulletproof coffee, for example, right? It's going to help you think better. Simple shit that works that we just got to do. So,
do you wake up any earlier in the morning to do that? Sorry, I asked that question. I figured I'd just hop on follow up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Was that you already got up at like 6 a.m.? You're like, okay, I have 2 hours usually.
Actually,
start waking up early.
That was a hard habit for me. So I'm like 6:30 right now. But waking up in the morning is actually probably one of the harder habits that I have instigated. It's something I worked on for a long time. And that's the other thing. If there's something you wanted to work on for a long time, don't start with that one. Don't start with that one. That's your mother load, right? That's the big kahuna.
Yeah.
Just understand that that's at a difficulty level where you're going to have to build up to. And I'm really glad I'd built up a whole bunch of other habits before I even attempted that, because I would have lost a lot of confidence if I tried to attempt it first and then failed miserably, which I've done countless times in the past. So that's the other thing. You're going to fail a ton. I've lost like thousands of dollars, essentially, over the past 16 months. I'm not kidding. It's not fun, but I know how much do you invest in making yourself a better person, essentially? And that's fine. It's the cost of improvement, and I'm okay with it because I know I've dug into each of those like tens of points that I've lost and extracted value from it, because those are habits a lot of the time that I'm still following through on. So that's kind of what I would say is it's okay to lose money. It's okay to not follow through on stuff as long as you are still in the game, right? You have to be in the game. You have to have skin in the game. You have to give a shit, and you have to have somebody else who gives a shit. If you don't have somebody who gives a shit, find somebody in this group. Like, it's clear that everybody here is invested in making themselves a better person, right? Find someone you really jive with. Find someone you really connect with, and make that something you can do. And find the areas of your life where you can have some quick wins. That's what I would say. Don't look for the habit you've always wanted to do, because that's a pain point that you can approach. Find something that if you did, might make your life a lot easier, and is somewhat really simple to do. It's like bull simple to do. And that's a great place to start. And like I said, you guys have heard of compound interest, and Albert Einstein's been famous for saying compound interest is like the eighth wonder of the world, where there's compound interest of habits, right? There's compound interest of happiness. There's compound interest of productivity. Like, this stuff adds up over time. And it's the kind of stuff that you guys can really get behind. And if you need another reason, you guys know the Harvard study, which was the longest running longitudinal study on happiness. If you haven't heard about this, I highly recommend it. Look up the TED Talk on the Harvard study. So TED Talk, Harvard study. You'll pick like the guy who's currently running it, I think, is going to pick it up. It's been going for about 90 plus years, I believe, at this point. And they isolated the core attribute that helped people become happier, make more money, and live longer lives. And it comes down to the depth of the relationships in their life. The depth and the number of close relationships in their life. And if you need another argument for doing something like this, you're going to go really deep with whoever that you choose to do this with. Because you'll get to learn your internal mechanics. Because if you look at it tactically, habits are a very tactical level situation. But strategically, you're looking at deep emotional rewiring, right? You're looking at rewiring who you are as an individual when you actually do these habits in the long term. right? For example, like internally, one of my cognitive biases is the overconfidence bias, right? That's the hardwired bias. It's hard to pull off by trying to change that from the get-go. But if I can change how I interact with my habits and control for my overconfidence bias and systematically get much, much better at it, then I can rewire myself out of the overconfidence bias, which is a hugely attractive thing for me, because I'm now training myself to follow through on things that I know I can do for sure. So that's basically what I'd really, really strongly recommend for you guys. Pick something stupid, simple, tiny, because the tinier and the simpler you're able to do it, the better it's going to be for you guys. And like I said, picking something that is tiny, simple, and a quick win, you can't get better kind of results from that. So that's kind of like what I would start with. I'm curious if you're any questions where you guys are struggling with in terms of your day-to-day, and any thoughts you've had so far.
I'll just ask one more, so another follow-up to that.
Sure.
What's your out of those habits? What's in your night stack? And then what time do you go to bed?
Go to bed anywhere between 10 and 11:30, depending on what's going on at night. Night stack is actually like relatively simple. It's an evening routine where I just take stock of the day, see what happened, what really happened, what actually happened. So I just close my eyes and walk myself through from the bed to all the stuff, and notice if I would do anything differently. In a certain sense. So let's say I would do just something differently, I just visualize rewiring it. So I'm actually in my body as I do that, which is a lot better than just thinking, oh, I should have done that. Rather than if you just follow through on that, just wire that in to the bodies. You can follow through on it a lot more because your mind thinks you're actually there. Imagination can be quite powerful that way. And then I spray magnesium. And previously, so I take this off this month. But previously, I used to play guitar for about 10 minutes before sleeping, and I realized I needed to play for at least 20 to 30 minutes, or I wouldn't get into it. Or if I did get into it, it would screw up my sleep time, and then I would sleep late. And that whole cycle didn't work out. So see, you're always tweaking. We're always tweaking the system. So and I just spray magnesium on my body before I go to bed. I read.
What does that do?
It's supposed to be really good for physical recovery and sleep. And transdermal magnesium is, I believe, a much more bioavailable way to absorb magnesium. Although I'm not a doctor, don't take my word for it. But that's what I've heard. And just read a little bit, and I sleep. Yeah. It's a lot. It's a lot simpler than the morning routine.
Yeah, totally. That's cool. Thanks.
Yeah, my pleasure. Anything else you guys want to chat about?
Yeah, I was curious about gratitude in particular. So, how did this system? How did this lead you to gratitude as a habit? And how do you incorporate that then into your day? Because it kind of is something that could permeate. It should, kind of become part of who you are throughout the entire day. Yeah.
So the thing is, the trick is to get it in early. The real trick is to, and a lot of like the high leverage behaviors, to get it in nice and early, right? So the meditation, the gratitude, getting it early is going to save you a lot of trouble. Mostly because if you don't do it, like it doesn't get done. Like 90+% of the time, if I don't do that in the morning, it does not get done, right? And secondly, the science behind that is pretty conclusive. Same thing, the science behind naps is pretty conclusive, right? It helps you have better memory, have better reaction time, have better reasoning ability. If you're not doing it, in my opinion, you're just stupid. Right? Like in that, if you follow that line of thinking, like most humans are actually like pretty stupid. I wouldn't use that word, but they're just not able to follow through on something they know actually works because of social reasons or behavioral reasons or whatever else. So the science behind gratitude is ridiculously solid. It's very conclusive. The science behind meditation is very conclusive. And so the way I convince myself is if it's conclusive and if I'm not doing it, I'm just really dumb. Right? It's like someone who's 80, who's never saved, and they're like, uh-oh, I'm 80 years old. I have no money. And how am I going to eat tomorrow? You knew this, right? It's not like you weren't born today, right? This is something you've known for a very long time. So my line of thinking goes, okay, if I know this works, how do I devise a system to make sure I can incorporate it in my life, right? How do I ensure, like, the only sustainable solution to any problem is a system. And it just turns out that I love creating systems that make my life better. And I'm grateful. Like, so if there's a problem, like, bam, let's instigate a system. Just make sure this is taken care of. And I will enforce that system like a Nazi. I would just enforce the hell out of that system. I always make sure the systems are very adaptable and responsive. Responsive systems are the heart of great organizations. They're the heart of a great life. Rigid systems will destroy more often than not. Because the more rigid they are, the less flexible they are, the less adaptable they are, the less they can move with change. And that's why a lot of people have like shitty times with systems, essentially. Like a lot of people don't like systems as much because they've had potentially a previous example or experience with a system that restricted their freedom or restrict their ability to become better. And now, because of that kind of trauma, for lack of a better word, they've just given up on systems, which and it's quite sad because it stops their life from becoming significantly better. So that's really how it started. And currently, so I do the 5-minute journal in the morning, evening, and I have a gratitude walk that I spoke about at the Bulletproof conference as well. So about a 20-minute walk. That walk hasn't changed. The office has not changed at all. It's still a 20 to 25-minute walk. Although I take a little longer because I walk a lot slower than I used to, which I found makes me really happy. So basically I turn my phone's on airplane mode and I listen to music or listen to a podcast and I just walk really slowly. And I think of all the things that are amazing in my life. And that's a really critical part of my day. I really enjoy it. It's a lot of fun. You just look around at all the tall buildings, and there are a lot of tall buildings here. It's a wonderful way to start a day. And that allows me the psychological distance to handle potentially almost anything that happens in the day. Have such a strong buffer. You know, I've meditated, I've already done a bunch of things that have built up my, how do I say this? Cognitive insulation, so to speak. I've just buffered myself with a lot of positivity. So whatever comes at me, I can handle without a lot of issues, essentially, without getting waylaid. Does that answer your question, Mark?
Yeah, it does. And I love the gratitude journal. I love the gratitude walk. I've been adopting that also.
That's great.
I guess one other question kind of related to this is, how do you trigger yourself in moments when you are feeling frustrated or some of those negative emotions creep in and it's easy to forget to be grateful?
So there's a couple of things there, right? So one is the assumption that you need to trigger yourself when you're feeling frustrated. So when you're frustrated, like there's two ways of going about it. You can either like trigger yourself to be grateful or happy, or you could really like dig in and see what's actually going on. For example, if I've had a rock solid morning routine and I'm still frustrated in the afternoon, what's going on? What's actually happening? What's the core of this? What's the foundation? So once in a few months, I'll have like a shit day, right? We all have them. I'll have a shit day. And what I mean by a shit day is just the momentum of the day starts to hit a point like a downward spiral, right? It starts to hit a point like a downward spiral. And we all have those days where like you're cognitively off your game, but also stuff starts happening where you're like, I'm a liability to myself right now. Right? Everybody has this. My advice, go home, sleep. Just let the day end. It's okay. Go home, sleep. Like if you're already a liability to yourself, anything you do with that in that situation is going to make the matter worse. Rather, just reset, start over, and 9 times out of 10, you'll be fine. Sometimes you just need to rest and you need to recover and buffer, right? So you got to figure out where you're at. Sometimes you can pull out of the tailspin. Sometimes you're not. The downward spiral hasn't gotten as much momentum. The key is awareness. The key is to recognize where you are in the frustration process. Is it the beginning of frustration? In which case, pulling out is pretty easy, right? All you got to do is take a walk, splash some cold water in your face, take a run, come back. You're good, right? If it hits something at a much deeper core aspect, let's say like a very deep part of you is triggered, that's information that you can log for future journaling sessions, for example. For you to really dig into like what happened there, what shook the core of my being, why did that happen? How do I work with that? Because that trigger is going to be with you for the rest of your life until you actually work with it and find a resolution to it. There's just a lot of ways, and sometimes some days you have C game. There's A game, there's B game, there's C game, right? And guess what? Most of us, we all have our own range, right? So like a B game or even a C game for a grandmaster of chess would be way beyond most of our A game in chess, right? We all have our individual ranges, but we all have C games. Like we've all had days that our performance is not great, and C games are foundational. What I mean by that is our core weaknesses start to emerge on C game days. Our core fundamental kind of like patterns of thinking that don't serve us start to emerge, and how we deal with them helps our performance as a competitor, as an entrepreneur, as an athlete, as a creative, as a freelancer, what have you. And identifying like what are your patterns? What do you do on A game days? How do you foster a B game? How do you cover against C game? Are all going to be really important ways to actually make yourself a better person and help yourself perform more consistently. That's huge.
That's got kind of a little follow-up question to that.
Yeah.
So some of these, there's oftentimes you'll have a bad day, like you said, but some of them it's caused by external inputs. So it's a bad day at work. Like we might be, totally in the zone doing stuff. Something comes up at work. Somebody says something. Immediately you're like, okay, now you're kind of on that downward slope. Yeah. So I know a couple times what I've done that's helped. So I like kind of get your feedback on what you've done, but what's often helped me is think about, okay, what's the worst case scenario here? Is it really that bad? So often it's like there's a sudden pressure to do something and it's going to throw off the rest of your day or whatever. So it's okay, well, what's the worst case scenario? And that has kind of helped me often. It's like, all right, well, it's not that bad. So let me kind of like, blood stops boiling a little bit. And it's like, okay, let's just, slowly get through this. But are there other things that you've done there? It's like, it's not much in your control. It's just something else happens, something, especially as a startup, for you guys, like I'm sure stuff pops up all the time and it's like, oh crap, sure. How do you manage it or like deal with that?
Sure. So when stuff pops up, you just got to get done. And that's fine. A lot of the times it's controllable. It's still a lot of the times there's still systems in place that you can do to control it. For example, like we have the culture here where if you're going to be in deep work for the next few hours, just let people know. I'm not going to be reachable, right? I'm doing this. I'll get back to you guys when this is done, etc. Right? That's standard. That's great. So that takes care of that. If something comes up, it gets taken care of. And if there is an adverse emotional reaction that stops it from being taken care of, then I just journal about it. You know, there's two ways I get out of that funk. I take a walk, I take a run, I listen to a good song, splash my face with cold water, and I journal. And between those things, you know, I'm able to drive out of it pretty quickly. Although, to be honest, like once I'm in flow, in workflow, not a lot of things like throw me off my game, because I've done a lot of the work during the day to get me into that momentum. And so I've already had a lot of positive momentum. So kind of derailing a freight train from the other side is kind of tough. Something that's like significant has to happen for it to lose momentum.
Yeah, totally. Okay, cool. Thanks.
Yeah, no worries.
I've got a question. Do you practice visualization in addition to gratitude and affirmations?
So yeah, so I do. My visualization is a little different than most. I'm a very kinesthetic learner. And what I mean by that is my learning is quite feeling based. And I'm not that visual. I like to depict concepts visually. I do think conceptually pretty visually, but when I'm looking to create things in my mind, I do it very much with feeling. And so I do visualization, but I don't focus as much on the visual aspect as on the emotional feeling aspect. And that's also in the morning.
Okay. I was just going to ask, do you incorporate it with the 5-minute journal routine?
Yeah, so I do it post meditation because frankly, that's the best bang for your buck. You're gonna get your mind in a place where it is relatively more still than it used to be. And then you can just concentrate your forces on creating something that you really want and building that in your mind. So I'm sure other times could be helpful too, but that's just something I've noticed pretty reliably, that I'm able to visualize a lot better right after meditation as opposed to pretty much any other time. Maybe potentially right before bed as well. So there's an argument there, but I'd recommend trying it out and seeing what works for you. And I think at the very core of this is actually really important to mention, is like, honestly, if there's nothing you've taken away from this, please let this be the thing you take away from this. Like, this is really huge and important. Why are you doing what you're doing? Why are you here? Why are you breathing? Why are you alive? Like, that is the foundation. And getting to the core, right? I asked a friend of mine recently, what's the purpose of your business? Why do you do what you guys do? And he's like, yeah, I think we have it written down. I'm like, that's the fucking wrong answer. He's a good friend of mine, so I could be pretty direct with him. That's the wrong answer. Like, I think we have it written down somewhere. Really? It's your business purpose? Right? Like, it's surprising. But the core, like, why are you doing what you're doing? Finding that out is going to be the foundation of pretty much any other thing that you ever do. The work you do, the life you live, the people that surround you. That's going to be the driving engine behind all that. And figuring that out early is one of the smartest things you can do. And that's the only thing you guys take away from this. Please let that be it. Because it's going to give your life so much more meaning, purpose, and direction, and drive.
Are there certain questions you ask yourself to come to that answer?
Yeah. So the only way that I've been able to do that is read great books by people and journal a lot. So there's two ways of coming across it, right? One, which is rare, which is the way I'm suggesting to you guys, is take the time to figure that out now. Take that time to figure that out, as long as it takes, right? The second, the way most people get into it, is they have a major life event. They lose a job. They lose a parent. They lose a friend. right? Something happens. They move countries. And then they got to figure it out. And then they're at a very shitty point in their life where they need to figure it out. And that puts a bunch of unnecessary pressure. Rather, what I'd recommend, and so in terms of books, I'd recommend Man's Search for Meaning, which is a great one by Viktor Frankl. I'd recommend Flow by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. Actually, instead of Flow, it's a little bit more academic. I like it. But, I'd recommend Rise of Superman. Actually, that's Stephen Kotler. It's a much more accessible book on flow. For meaning, Jonathan Livingston Seagull is a really good one by Richard Bach. There's a ton. This might not resonate with everybody, but Ender's Game is a phenomenal book that helped me with like my story, essentially. And Power of Now is a classic one that will also help you. It's a very awareness-inducing book. But basically, like just hunger for it.
Oh, Jesse, can you mute, please? Sorry.
Hunger for it, like when you know the foundation that this is your core, this is unshakable, this is why you're doing what you're doing, and nothing else matters. You have a clear line in the sand. You'd be like, this is what I'm about, this is what I do, this is what I don't do, this is what I represent, this is what I don't represent. And it makes life so much easier. Life makes life so much more purposeful, so much more engaging. And you know, from there, it allows you to come at life with a lot more buoyancy, because it allows you to weather the ups and downs, knowing that there is a radar that you're moving through. That in the book, The Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl, he talks about the people. It's a book written by a man who survived a concentration camp for years. And he talks about the people who actually are able to survive versus the people who don't. And what helps them endure the atrocities that were dished out to these men and women. And at the core, it's believing in something greater than themselves. Like, you have to believe in something that's bigger than you. And guess what? Like, it's not religion. It's not companies. You have to create your own thing. There is a thing inside you that you're here for. Everybody has a core of a story, core of a meaning, right? You just have to dig in and see what's going on. There's a really interesting blog post by Steve Pavlina. He probably released like 10 years ago, called how to find your life purpose in about 20 minutes. I'm just gonna type it out here. 20 minutes, but there we go. Search for this, check out that link. That's actually a remarkably good link. It's a clickbait title, but it's a remarkably good idea. And the process is, in my opinion, it's like pulling off the layers of an onion one by one. The top one, the one below that, the one below that, the one below that. And eventually you'll get to some place that you're like, you know what, this is it. This is something that I can stand behind. This is something that's foundationally me and nothing else. So,
yeah, that's powerful. I guess to that point, like what are you working towards next then? You made a lot of progress, obviously, with the 5-minute journal and gratitude and productivity and habits. What's next in your journey?
So for the next 4 to 6 months or so, I'll be focusing on scaling the impact of currently what we have going on in terms of distribution, et cetera. And just ensure that we have the system set up so when we create more things, we're able to spread them across a wider platform. And then right after that, then we'll just look at new things to create, right? And continuing on this journey. So there's a lot of ideas and only so much time. So we gotta we got to pick wisely. But very excited for that.
Yeah. And I know systems being very important to you. And obviously you're setting up a lot of systems in order to kind of scale what you're able to do. Are there other systems other than this habit system that you've adopted in your personal life in order to improve your own health over the past few years?
So a friend of mine just recently started this company where it's called Just Blend. And they basically give you like it's all organic ingredients, all portioned out. So you literally put it in your blender and blend with water, and you got a smoothie. Like stuff like that. I'm a sucker for stuff like that. If it's super simple, and if I could just do it in a second, and it just improves my health, take my money. So I do things like this all the time. There's like I weigh myself every day. That's a mini habit. It's not really a habit. It just gets a sense of what's going on here, right? Just like a quick awareness checks that keep me on my game. I drink a bulletproof coffee pretty much every day.
Are there some of these habits that you've actually killed, that you've decided you started to implement and then realized that they're not valuable to you? And how do you decide to kill them?
Tons. Like it's usually like I'm evolving. I evolved them quite a bit. For example, I said, I cut off guitar, right? That was a habit for about 4 to 5 months, right? Then I realized actually it's not working for me at this point. And so the core 4 or 5 habits won't really change much. So the meditation, the journaling, the exercise, the planning and review stuff, the doing the one thing in the day that really moves things forward, that kind of thing.
Awesome. Yeah. Anyone else have a question? I know we're coming up to 4 o'clock, so maybe we'll do one more.
Yeah, I have a question. Can you guys hear me? Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. So I'm kind of at this point in my life where I have a lot of things to do, but nothing's really a priority, So and I've kind of been playing around with doing, a little of everything in one day, doing a lot of one thing in one day and then another thing in the next day. And I was just wondering what your thoughts on that would be.
Well, what's one thing that's going to leave you feeling, what's one thing that if you finished would leave you feeling with a ton of progress?
Definitely working on my stand-up.
Well, then you have the answer. That's it.
Cool.
Right? Just ask that question. What's one thing that if I have completed by the end of today will leave me feeling happy and fulfilled with my progress? Right? And just do that. That's it. Leave everything else. Just do that.
Right.
And that's it. Just find your way to do that. Go to a coffee shop, go to a monastery, like find your zone and do that thing. That's it. Turn your phone on airplane mode, tell your people that I'm not going to be available for the next 6 hours. Just work on stand-up.
Got it. Thanks.
Yeah, just to add to that really quick for anybody else, there's a Chrome tool called Momentum. So every time you open a tab, it shows you a cool picture, but they have a nice thing is like, what's your one goal for the day? So it's an awesome way just to keep reminding yourself, that's my goal for the day, especially when we're always on our computers. That's a good reminder to be like, oh yeah, I should work on that. And then do everything that you guys been talking about to actually get it done.
Nice. Yeah. Thanks, Neil. And thanks for the question, Jamie. I guess, yeah, we got one more. Anyone else want to throw out one last question? All right. Well, I guess we'll end it with UJ. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you for coming in and sharing this knowledge. If people wanted to, I guess, learn more, like connect with you online, is there somewhere people should go?
I am not active on a lot of social media apart from Instagram because that's part of my habits. So feel free to hit me up on Instagram. That's it. My goal is to not be super accessible, so I can actually do work. So that's basically the only channel that I'm somewhat active on. So yeah, so find me there, and keep actually, if you guys want to send an idea or something like that, feel free to email hello@founderjournal.com. And if like awesome, cool, legit situation, and they'll get in touch with me as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. This was, I think, went really well. This was our first ever, experience trying to do an entirely virtual conference. Ironically, my computer froze also, but fortunately it kept going. So this works out fantastic. So thank you very much. I know if whoever's in Chicago and is coming to dinner tonight, we had a slight change of plans. So rather than the Grange Burger Hall, we'll be going to Green Street Smoked Meats. So just look for an email from David, and we'll connect more about that. So thank you, UJ. Thank you, everyone else, for joining. And we'll have another meetup scheduled really soon.
Yeah. And enjoy. I actually love the city of Chicago. I might be there in the next 3 or 4 months. So
let us know. We'll take you out to dinner.
Sounds great.